Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for the magic of brand storytelling. I'm Joyce Gedeke, the Vice President of Marketing and Brand Strategy at the Vegas Chamber. We're so excited and grateful to partner with President's Club member REQ and bring this great virtual session to you. Before we get started, though, I wanted to share a couple of exciting things coming up at the Vegas Chamber. On December 10th, we have our installation luncheon and State of the Chamber when we induct our 2021 Board of Trustees, say thank you to Chairman Tom Burns, and welcome incoming Chair-elect Gina Bonjovi. Then be sure to mark your calendars for Preview Las Vegas, coming 1/21/21. Can you believe it? That's January 21st, 2021. Stay tuned for more details coming soon on vegaschamber.com. So let's get to it. What is a brand? What's in a brand, right? It's more than a logo. It's more than a tagline or a color or colors. The criticality of being able to tell your story is how you can communicate your brand in a meaningful and sustainable way. And speaking of being sustainable, this coming January, the Vegas Chamber is celebrating its 110th anniversary, allowing our brand to evolve for more than a century plus. As many of you know, earlier this year, the Vegas Chamber launched our own rebrand, and we went through the journey to ensure that the brand story honors our history and looks far into the future. And it was a delicate dance to get to where we're at today, because none of us were around 110 years ago, right, Justin? But those before us did know two things. We are Vegas and we are the Chamber, and that's the core of who we are and always will be. Today's session will take you behind the scenes of a brand story journey through a real life example. And there are so many takeaways that you can apply to your brand story and evolve and sustain it for years to come. A couple of housekeeping tips are that we're in webinar mode, which means you're off camera and you are muted, but we want you to be engaged, please. So we encourage comments. Please use the chat function throughout the session and feel free to place any questions for the panel in the chat or actually the Q&A as well. Please also use gallery mode. So hopefully you can see all of our panelists and not just the ones speaking, depending on what platform you're using. And now I am honored to introduce my friend and proud President's Club member, Justin Cohen, Executive Vice President of REQ. Justin, we're so appreciative of you and your team doing this for our members, and we're excited to hear the magic of brand storytelling. Justin, take it away, please.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you everyone for joining. Good morning. Thank you, REQ Team and Vegas Chamber for getting together to put this on. This should be a fun and informative session for all. My name, as you heard from Joyce, is Justin Cohen. I'm sure plenty of you are joining our Chamber members that I have met on occasion in the past, back when we had lots of in-person events. I'm based here in the Vegas office of REQ. We have been in the Valley for not quite 110 years, but we're entering our 12th year. And we're happy to be entering that year, hopefully a better and stronger year for everyone in the Valley. Today we brought together some of our most dynamic talent from across the nation to take you on a fun behind the scenes, we'll call it exercise, to share some of the magic of brand storytelling. So with that, I'll intro the folks we have on and let them, I should say, intro themselves real quickly. So I've obviously been with REQ for 12 years. Stephen, do you want to go ahead and intro yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Stephen Costin. I'm the Senior Brand Strategist and look forward to the session. I've worked on large, big brands, you know, like Waymo and Alphabet and Amazon, but also small ones and small business ones, like ones that just came out in dealing with transplantation in Las Vegas in terms of drones and new startups and technology. So looking forward to sort of getting a look at what we can do with this exercise. Stay tuned.
Thanks. Kenny?
Hi, everybody. My name's Kenny Rufino. I'm a creative director at REQ. I've been with REQ for about 7+ years now, but I've been working in the design industry for about 22 years or so. You know, certainly worked with large and small clients. I think, you know, one thing I'm extremely proud of is I cut my teeth, you know, as employee number 4 at a startup in New York right after grad school. And that's really where I learned about the significance and why design is important to, you know, a company at that size. We're looking forward to sharing this with you.
Great, thanks, Kenny. Bailey?
Good morning and afternoon to everyone. I guess most of you in Vegas still morning time, like me here in San Diego. My name is Bailey Gray. I'm Director of Social Media and Content at REQ. I've been with the company for just hit 6 years a couple of weeks ago, and have loved being a part of the agency world here. Kind of like Stephen and Kenny both mentioned, I've worked with brands of all sizes, both large and small. Started working in social media and content when really they both kind of became available, when it was people just started using Facebook for business and Twitter. And, remember having to go through the conversation with my boss back then saying, hey, we should be on Twitter. Why? Well, everyone's there. We should be doing this. And when people ask, well, what is a blog? Back in those days. So yeah, I've been really a big part of the kind of storytelling that we've had through social and content for a while now. And today we'll be focusing a little on the research side of things and how we can leverage what people are talking about on social and online to help inform that brand strategy.
Thank you, Bailey. And Kels, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kelsey Powell, and I'm coming to you live from our San Diego location. I've been with REQ for just past 8 years, last month, so definitely very well versed in the social media space. Currently holding the position as Director of Paid Media, leading our social advertising team. Much like Bailey, right there when social media became something that businesses really needed to be involved in, having worked on the organic side with him a few years ago and then moved over to the paid realm. So I'm excited to kind of tell you guys how you can shift that brand storytelling strategy into actually campaigns on social media and drive some revenue for your business. So excited to show you guys what we got.
Thank you, Kelsey. And while we would love to have had the 100+ amazing, talented team members that we have at REQ across the nation on this, you would not have gotten to hear from any of us because we all have too many ideas to share. It would never have stopped. So we are fortunate to have these awesome 4 folks from around the nation joining us to share in this exercise. So onto the exercise. To set the stage for the next, I guess, a little less than an hour now, about 50 minutes, we're going to run you through a conceptual internal session where we take a product and we workshop it. We want to use a product that would be fun and relatable to this audience. So while this isn't exactly how the process works, we're aiming to squeeze as much good info into a short time as possible, and we thought this would be a fun format. So hopefully you find it as well. Think of yourselves as being on the other side of a two-way mirror or looking through a camera, watching us work through an opportunity. We'll save time at the end, as Joyce mentioned, for a little roundtable Q&A. So go ahead, add those into the chat, add them into the Q&A. If you find what we're talking about engaging, please feel free to have that dialogue going on throughout. We will enjoy that and often feed off of that. So please go ahead. Please note, everything being discussed today is for demonstration purposes only. This is not a real session. This is not actual, and this is not work that we're actively doing. So with that, I'm going to, if you will, turn to our crew in the room and get started. So time for the fun. Thank you all for getting together so quickly. I told you this was a cool opportunity, and I wasn't kidding. Who wants a chance to work on the first high-speed rail in the US? The folks from Brightline West Coast have asked us to workshop their new project connecting LA to Las Vegas, and for me to get back to them with some of our thoughts. Here's what we know about the project from the Brightline team. High-speed rail is headed to the West Coast, and we can't wait. Brightline West, a Brightline affiliated company, will connect the 260 miles between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. They plan to break ground on construction in California and Nevada in the second half of 2020, really any day now since their bond offering already went off, and open for service in the first half of 2020. So for the purpose of this exercise, for one conversation now, let's leave COVID out of it, and hopefully by the time we're in 2024, it won't be that much of a concern. So let me take you through some of the key facts that we received from the Brightline folks, and then we can jump in. So expected travel time, about 3 hours. Their route is 2 times faster than driving. Zero emission electric trains. As you guys know, the environmental part is big for me, so I think that's pretty exciting. And considering how many cars are going back and forth across all the time, that would be a lot to remove. Top speeds of 200 miles an hour, certainly pretty awesome. Sounds like getting a new Tesla Roadster. 400,000 tons of CO2 removed annually by pulling those vehicles off the road. Connections to the Metrolink and planned future connection to Cal High Speed Rail in Palmdale. And convenient station location off the Vegas Strip, just for us locals down south in the I-15. So let's frame this conversation, since we don't have long, around research, figuring out what the core brand story should be, what we think it should be, and the path to launch. So let's run through this and see what we can do in about 45 minutes. Stephen, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Justin. We got some facts there. But if we think about the research, and we think about where we want to go, which is developing a brand and a story. And a brand and a story in many ways is emotional. It's a connection that we feel a sense of belonging. And we have to figure out who our audiences are and where the research takes us in terms of what is the brand to fulfill, what can Brightline do. It's certainly said in the facts that there are some attributes about speed, it's high speed. But before we get into kind of the brand story and looking deeply into the research, let's step back and personalize it. Has anyone taken a high-speed rail, and what's your personal experiences? What does it feel like? What does it feel like? Anybody?
Yeah, I have. Stephen knows this, but I embarrassingly don't know how to drive. So I rely on public transportation, and when I travel, I love visiting countries where I can take the train. In Japan, riding the bullet train throughout the country, it's incredibly convenient. And yeah, it's fast, like you can sit there and the world just sort of whizzes by you. But it's surprisingly relaxing. The ride's pretty smooth. It's quiet, doesn't sort of clack as you go along. Kind of calming and relaxing. That was my experience.
So great. So the feelings you got were relaxing. You can step back. The word calm that made you feel something. What about the experiences others have had versus maybe car, train, plane?
Yeah, so a year ago, last fall, I was in Scotland and wanted to, of course, get to the distillery of my favorite scotch, which is why I was in Scotland, in addition to playing golf, and certainly didn't want to drive across Scotland, having driven across other countries. So we took the train, and I don't know, it was the highest speed train, certainly high speed by standards of what we have here. So it was, to Kenny's point, calm, and there was no rickety sounds or anything. But getting to see effectively the Highlands out the right side of the train and the rest of Scotland out the other, and endless, places where things that look like Loch Ness, basically, for lack of a better description, and see them and embrace them. Versus a decade earlier, I drove across Germany, and all I remember is the Autobahn and the steering wheel, which was cool, but definitely different than, seeing Scotland and having a better time doing it.
Okay, so we've got the beauty of seeing something. We're in Scotland. You've got the relaxation and calm and the bullet train in Japan. What about experiences here in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and in that corridor? What does, driving a car, anybody, or a plane, anybody feel something different about this idea of high speed? What happens when you would take a car? What are the benefits there of a train?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I've got some experience with that. Being in San Diego, I've done the car ride to and from Vegas. We actually, my wife and I went out about a year ago, and we decided to drive, and we made great time going out there. But then we were supposed to be driving home on Sunday. We heard horror stories of people just being backed up for 6, 7, 8 hours or longer on the small road between Vegas and Southern California. And so we made the decision, even after a late night, I will say, a late Saturday night in Vegas, to get up at about 6 a.m. and bust our tails to get out of the hotel as fast as we could and beat that traffic out of Vegas. And we did, but the downside to that was we had to cut our evening short Saturday night. We didn't get to have any fun on Sunday. We didn't get to really, enjoy that experience Sunday. So ultimately we're cutting our time short in order to just beat the traffic. So, the idea of being able to take a train or something like that seems really appealing to me, being in the Southern California area.
Excellent. So in other words, what we've gotten just from our own personal sort of tie-ins and a rule to think about is context. So that certainly personalizes that. But let's get deeper into it in terms of the research. Bailey, do we have any research that contextualizes what we just said, calm, the beauty, the saving time? And this is high speed also. It's not just a train. It's not just an Amtrak. It's an elevated experience. Any data points that we can build from?
Yeah, so once Justin started bringing this through, I jumped into NetBase, our social listening tool, to see what type of conversations seem to already be going on around that high-speed train between Vegas and Southern California, and we're already seeing a lot of good conversation pop up. So within these little word clouds we see right here, we can start to pick up on some of those commonalities between those conversations. For one, being that efficiency and speed. So we see high speed train coming up a lot. People talking about getting you there fast. So, a much quicker way to travel than maybe car or plane. But then a couple of other things are popping up, kind of back to what Justin and Kenny were talking about. We see enjoyable way to travel really showing up pretty big there. So a lot of conversation about that. So, I think those are some things we could focus on. But then a couple, back to my own experience too, we see reducing traffic congestion. So, I think there's a couple of really key pillars that are popping out early in this conversation that could be, something we want to focus on with our messaging and storytelling here.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely say marketing Vegas casinos and Vegas attractions and Vegas in general for the last 20 years, it's common knowledge that traveling here in a car on a Friday from Southern California is a terrible, terrible thing. And going back on a Sunday is a terrible, terrible thing. And people either, spend all of Sunday here, and we have specific activities to keep them busy so that they can drive back late to maybe go after the traffic. And then in the same vein, there are people who want to grab a breakfast to go at 6 a.m. like you and your wife to get out of here. And then, of course, when we get up in a hotel, don't you want to enjoy the day and do something there rather than, kind of run out? So it's definitely a theme. And, I think we see that in some of these words here too about, nobody wants to sit in the traffic going back and forth. And there's as many 8-hour stories of that ride as there are 4-hour stories.
So it's interesting. It's not only the actual experience of the train itself, it's also the points of where it's going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. So we've got a kind of tones of these words like enjoyable, love, stoked, and then we got functional. But who are we appealing to? Who's our audiences? We really need to build a brand around understanding our audiences. Any thoughts on that, Kelsey?
Yeah, so I think a good part of this research phase from a media buying perspective is, Bailey's team is working on what is that sentiment. And what we would do from a media end is looking at what your competitor set is doing. So knowing that our destination is Los Angeles to Las Vegas, we know that we are going to be competing against those airlines. So looking specifically at Southwest Air and what are they doing and what kind of messaging and creative are they putting out that can help us stand apart from them. And a way that any business can look at their competitor set is a free tool called Facebook Ad Library. And you can access this, just Google search it and it'll pull up. And any business page on Facebook, it'll basically show you what ad creative that they are running. And it's really going to help you identify, what your competitors are doing and how can you stand apart from them. So what messaging do we need to put in front of our new user base to get them to take this train versus jumping on the plane? And the more that you know about your competitor set, that's going to then help you now identify how we're going to build those target personas. So using that information from Bailey's team, knowing the sentiment, we kind of came up with these 3 business groups here. So those being the SoCal leisure travelers, a business traveler, and the frequent commuters. And what my team would then do is go and start thinking about what ad platforms they're targeting capabilities and what does the potential reach look like. Because you do want to make sure that you're working together with the creative team during this process as you're building that brand storyline, so they know what types of creative to build. Are they building 15-second videos for Instagram stories? Are they building vertical static images for Pinterest? Know how large your audience is on such ad platforms so they can better dictate their strategy. Just specifically, doing some preliminary research, I found that there's nearly 15 million frequent travelers identified on Facebook, so definitely an audience there for us to target. And kind of going back to, we're sending people to Las Vegas on this train, so there's probably a lot of bachelorettes and bachelor groups going out. So leverage Facebook's life event targeting. Really start to poke around in there so you can identify, what audiences are out there and start building your persona segments so you can best then deliver the right creative once we come up with that.
So let me challenge us all, because I think you're absolutely right, Kelsey. We've got some very core tactics to really touch on the leisure traveler, the business traveler, or the commuter. And there's no question we need to build on those channels. But the question is, part of this magic is to figure out what the brand story is. And the brand in some ways is an intangible. It's something that you feel that all of them, regardless if you're going there to recreate and have fun, or you're going there for business, or you're going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas or vice versa, or the commuter, even though that the congestion problems are challenging with car, or Southwest to look at the competitors, what is the sense of this brand, this idea that we want to belong to something for all of them, for all these audiences? Because I think if we can start on a layer above, then we can segment. So there's no question that on the advertising, we could definitely segment. How do we get into kind of the core stuff of what?
Yeah, it's one of the things you have me thinking about sitting in Vegas is I feel like it's going to be easy to be left out when everyone's focused on getting the SoCal people here. Whereas for us, this is a mode of exit from the desert, which we all do regularly to somewhere in California and other places. And, we should keep this conversation today, I think, centered around, SoCal and leisure travelers and that bulk of the audience. But, we shouldn't lose sight of everything from the people who live along the route that are impacted, to those of us who are in Vegas who are going to use it, to people who may be commuting to their office in California on this going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, these attributes of social, responsible, and eco-friendly, no question that is valuable. But for someone who wants to get on a train and a high speed and go out and have fun, how important is that? I mean, I know that these are important, but let's really lift it. What's the essence of that experience, that calming experience? Can we build on this to really understand the value of the brand? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, going back to when we were talking about how we felt on trains, Kenny, like you and I, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was at ease. It was a good situation. It wasn't, by contrast, I flew to Florida with my 5-year-old twins last weekend, and while they're delightful to travel with and they do the airport beautifully, it's still security and in and out of car and luggage and all this stuff. Whereas in train, you get out, you get on, you put your luggage down, and then you just you breathe the air out. And then you can start enjoying yourself and enjoying the time. And I think if you combine that with what we're seeing here, what Bailey pulls out of Global Web Index, and I can feel good about it because I'm not, leaving fumes and my carbon footprint all over the place. And maybe have a drink because, by the way, I'm not driving. And right now on Southwest, you can't drink, but we'll leave COVID out of this. So I think, all those things can come together for this experience versus the stressful, okay, the vacation begins when I get to the hotel because I'm done with bag and baggage claim and everything. Whereas here, the experience, you can be on vacation on the way here.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, obviously we talked about the environmental impact previously, but I'm really drawn to the second and the fourth points here. So organizing, simplifying your life. Everybody's familiar with what it's like to travel and going through security, lining up, and even getting to the airport, looking for parking. I mean, there's so many things you need to check off your list before you're even on the plane. And that's even before you've flown. And the fourth point too, about making you feel valued, and the airline industry, certainly they're trying as hard as they can, but a lot of the airlines, they're interested in, how many passengers they can pack onto a plane. Unfortunately, and if you're an airline passenger, does that make you feel valued? Probably not. But even just opening up another tab and looking at the Brightline website, looking at what their experience is like on train, but also at the stations, how different it is from the current way we fly. This could be something that, a lot of people, would find interesting, and for different reasons too. I could see people wanting to take the train instead of driving or flying for different reasons.
So that makes me think about the nature of what the second piece is, the story, because the story has a beginning, middle, and end. So, and it also has to deal with the feeling of something, whether it be in this case speed or convenience or economic impact or enjoyability. But what's the common denominator? Is it a sense of, like in a story, a journey, taking someplace, somewhere?
That's definitely part of it. It's a literal journey because you are traveling from one place to another. But there are lots of really great metaphors here. And I think when we were looking at the audience slide, and Kelsey was going through the different segmentation, certainly, people who are traveling, like a bachelorette group or a bachelor group, they're going to be a very different mindset than, let's say, like a business traveler, right? But there are going to be commonalities between them. You know, certainly if you're traveling for business and you're focused on getting something done, maybe you're prepping for a meeting, there's the notion of using the time on the train, you know, better, right? Using your time to maybe focus for the meeting, or maybe you're decompressing so that you can be ready for the meeting. But then, you know what, if you're a group of gals and you're going on a bachelorette party, the train lets you have fun earlier, right? Like, you don't have to wait until you get to the destination now in order to be able to celebrate, in order to be able to connect with your family or your loved ones or your friends. So there's interesting kind of attributes here why people would choose the train. Obviously, the environmental impact can be huge. Like Justin mentioned, how many cars would be not traveling back and forth, and what would that mean for emissions? What would that mean for, you know, CO2 levels? But even a new way to travel, you know, thinking of how it's enjoyable. You can still get from point A to point B, but doing it differently allows you to feel special, to feel valuable, to be part of a valuable experience.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Kels.
I mean, I think one way we can build on this too is trying to figure out how can we make sure that we have a cohesive, universal message across all of our creative, specifically with advertising campaigns, while still A/B testing. So you always do want to make sure that you're going to evolve your brand strategy. So what you come up with in the beginning likely is going to pivot based on the results there. So knowing that those were our key audience attributes, how can you apply those audience attributes across all audiences with still keeping that same look and feel, but kind of tailoring it specifically for that bachelor group or for that business traveler that's more concerned about that speed and convenience. So ways that we can do this is, you know, through plenty of different ad creatives. So activating and launching through different ad types. So we're developing video, we're developing carousel ads and static images. And again, universal messaging, try to just make sure that it has that same look and feel across all forms. Building those target personas across all different ad platforms, and really kind of, you know, tailoring each, again, kind of what they want. So a great new way to kind of think about new emerging platforms. You know, I talk a lot about Facebook and Instagram. That's always going to be the social giant in the room, and definitely want to make sure that you are placing media there. But what are some new ones? Everyone, sir, here has hopefully heard of TikTok, and it's definitely one of the fastest growing social media apps out there right now in terms of daily usage. So that is a video first and video only ad platform. So this is a great way. Anytime you launch a new brand, video is going to be the best way to educate that new user. So you want to try to get your message across in that first 3 seconds, of course, get that new brand in there, but then use the 15 seconds to really kind of, you know, leverage their time lapse feature and leverage that journey. So really show them getting on the platform in LA, you know, sitting back as a business traveler. Maybe they open up their computer, but maybe they're taking a shot with their bachelorette group, you know, again, with the A/B testing. And then finally arriving in Las Vegas, and there they are doing their thing. And you can do all of that through that 15 seconds. So really kind of, again, A/B testing, make not just in your creative, not just in your audience, but in platforms as well. Really kind of prepare yourself to go see what's out there and see what works and what sticks. I think another great way to leverage new content as well. So we will be working, you know, with Kenny and Steven to develop our own content, but is there opportunity to partner with influencers? Whether you are a small business, don't think that you have to go after the Kim Kardashians of the world. You can definitely go find that nano influencer in your market. This is really just a great way for you to ensure that you are getting after an audience where your new user base trusts them. So it is going to be hard as a new business to really jump in there and build that trust. But a way that you can build that trust quickly is, you know, leveraging these influencers, because this person is already following them. They already trust them. So if they see that, you know, I'm Kelsey, I'm an influencer, and you already follow me, and I jump on this train and I'm talking very highly of it, that's just going to help build that trust quicker. And also, these people are used to taking video content. They're used to taking pictures. That's pretty much their job. So they're pretty good at it. And it's going to allow you to really kind of partner with them and then use their content to better promote your brand as well.
So Kels, if I could, and anyone else, of course, Bailey and others, feel free to jump in. Let me back us up with a little bit of the challenge, because I know one of the things that we're going to have to communicate with the Brightline folks about is the path between here and 2024, which goes from funding and development, and then, the unfortunate reality of shutting down lanes. Everybody cover your ears, shutting down lanes on the 15 between here and LA for periods while we build a train up the middle of it at some points and on the side of it at others. And some of you have been through those passes, so you know what it's going to be like to build a train that goes through those passes. That's something we're going to have to deal with, and the ramifications of all of those people who are currently forced to drive, and their drive is going to be negatively impacted by our construction. And yet we want them to love us and like us. And I don't know how much we can show. Maybe we can show people in Brightline in Miami getting on and enjoying the train, but other than, kind of renderings and VR, I don't know how much we can show them doing that for 4 years here. Whereas I think there's, some potential not so positive stuff that we have to think about. And how would we think about messaging that? What types of channels? Because before I think we can get to the story, I want to make sure we've thought of all these different things that are going to inform it.
Also, just adding on top of that, not only the construction, but this is high-speed rail, and perceptions of trains, and not to put anything negative on Amtrak, but that we see the train as something maybe different than high speed. So the question is, what's the emotion? Is it speed? Is it legacy? Is it the Wild West? Is it romance that we can experience trains through, movies? I mean, what's that feeling? I think that we really need to kind of construct that feeling for all of our audiences so we can build that story. Thoughts?
I think we can, when we look at that story and our different audiences, I agree with something Kelsey mentioned earlier. It's like we do want to make sure we have that cohesive, kind of messaging. But at the same time, if we're looking at these, kind of 3 different audiences we talked about earlier, the leisure travelers, the business travelers, and then the common frequent commuters, they're all different audiences that are more than likely going to be active on different mediums, right? So Kelsey touched on, Facebook and Instagram, that could be where maybe we're more likely to reach the leisure travelers. And even the leisure travelers are going to be segmented out differently, right? The Bachelorette group may be different than, the story I told at the beginning. My wife and myself, we were leisure travelers in that, but going to Vegas for a different reason than maybe a Bachelorette group would. So what channels are all of those different groups active on? And based off that, I think we have a little bit of a different story to tell through all those different channels. So what we're doing on an Instagram or a TikTok may be different than the story we're telling through our on-page content on the Brightline website, what blogs we're writing, where to kind of go back to what Justin was asking with some of the sentiment around it. Hey, if we're seeing that a common issue or problem or question that people are having about the road construction or something like that, let's get in front of that. Let's answer those questions. Let's take that on head first and get in front of it. So let's put out content that helps speak to what that issue may be or the sentiment that's out there. So again, I think as we look at telling this story, it depends on where we are and where our audiences are active, and that's going to help shape some of that conversation too.
Yeah, one of the things I'm thinking about, Bailey, as you talk about that and channel choice and recognizing that we all listen in different ways, and the Sirius XM audience is different than the Spotify audience, is different than the Pandora audience. Now they're all over Southern California, and we can carve them up differently based on San Diego, OC, and LA. And they tend to, if you think about those different channels, probably live in those different areas a little bit. But the messages, again, to your point, are going to be different because it's a different audience. It's the convention in business in one way coming out of Orange County versus kids coming out of college towns. And it really, I think we can use channel choice and the way we tell the message and the stuff that we're working around and these concepts of the journey and the experience, to help tell this story the right way to the different people. And, to Stephen's point, not forget some of those intermediate phases that we have to, talk to, because those audiences and even constituencies are going to be role players to let us be in a position in 4 years to be, a loved, ideally better transportation alternative. Anyone have any thoughts before I ask Kenny, please help us figure out, in the vein of this. Yeah, please.
Well, let's get to the big idea.
Yeah, Kenny, what are we thinking? What's our brand story looking like?
So, we've been talking about this for like short amount of time, but there's some sort of obvious things that in my head and hopefully in yours too are kind of sticking out. What I mentioned earlier about better time, again, whether you're traveling for business or for leisure, like time's valuable, and it goes by really quickly. But what if you had more time to do something, right? Rather than having to check off that list again. Use it to spend your time relaxing or concentrating or preparing for something, or to connect with whoever you're traveling with. The possibilities really are endless, and it's something that would appeal across different audiences, something that we could finesse for different people. And there's an emotional thing there too, because certainly the time savings is great, but it's really what you do with the time that is going to elicit emotion. And if we're thinking of stories, you want the stories certainly to communicate something, but you want it to be memorable. And the memorable stories are the ones that elicit emotion from the audience. I think the second one is the idea, the notion of transforming something. High-speed rail has the potential to transform not just the West, but the entire country, right? Similar to like the network of high-speed rail in Japan post-World War II, that revolutionized that country. And it contributed a lot to their economics afterwards. But the romantic notion, certainly the romantic notion of the train, right? But the romantic notion of the West and how people went West, to find opportunity, to strike gold, to transform something, to revolutionize something, to stake a claim. Like there's so many really cool subthreads that would, support that transformation layer. And obviously there's the technology part of the transformation, which is, nice plus, a little benefit there. And then the journey, which I think we started talking about, we haven't fully explored yet. This journey that, we're all on, obviously. But the journey of California and Las Vegas, the relationship between the two, the relationship between the residents, what does this mean for that journey, for that relationship? Transforming the way that people feel about travel between the cities. Does that mean that people are going to travel more often now that certainly you've got convenience, you've got this, high-speed network in between? The implications are going to be, well, pretty significant. But I love the idea of a journey and of how that can evolve over time, thanks to something like Brightline West.
What's really fascinating about these three is that brands live in the mind. And so we each take each one of these ideas, a better time. And what does that really mean? I love the play on words there. And I wonder how Brightline can see this as a play on words. It's better, but it's also a better time for you. So who is the hero here? On the transformation piece also, what are you transforming? Yourself? And how is that going to be conveyed, or the environment to make it more stewardship? And journey is so core. What about tone? Each one of these has real big overarching brand attributes. Anybody have any thoughts on tone?
I want to ask you guys, but I want to inform it with Vegas, because I look at these words and I think about Vegas and I think about what we're all about, sitting obviously at the top, which is certainly a better time. And, the journey, whether it's people who come to Vegas, and I imagine a lot of folks that are with us today, came to Vegas from California in one way or another. But, the journey, whether you're a tourist or someone who lives here, Vegas is a journey. And, whether you're here for 2 days or a 7-day convention, expanding the getting here, which usually isn't a great thing, into part of the journey is kind of transformation. And the last piece of transformation, owed to our LVCVA ads of plenty of time. People get in the car in one way here, they get out of the limo and it's a whole new character. And that's true. Vegas allows for that transformation. And I think the train can be the same thing. You get on the train in LA and one thing, and, the girl or guy who gets out in Vegas is potentially a very different person.
I love that idea. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Who's telling
so well,
Is
that
it
brings
the
me back to what
passengers?
Bailey and Kelsey are talking about. Who are these different audiences? Because I can't help but see myself living here and think about using it as a way to go back, which is entirely different if somebody escaping their regular life to get out to Vegas, which is Kels and his girls or Billy and her wife in whatever context that
Totally.
is that they're coming.
Co-creating, yeah.
Yeah, I like that word, and thinking about the impact that, you know, you are on an airplane. I don't really feel like you're necessarily together, even though you're together. If anything, you're not. Whereas in a train, you can feel together. You have more time to look around. Seats can be facing each other, which some of you remember planes had a long time ago. You know, and I think that there are elements of that that make it back to our journey. I think, you know, part of that, you know, potential journey. Because I know we've got to get some info back to the folks at Brightline. Let's move on to some takeaways and talk through, you know, some of what we think I can report back. So with that, you know, kind of informing brand story, obviously, you know, that's your world, Stephen. You know, let's pause and think about both what we've talked about, and then now let's think about our friends on the webinar today with us. And whether we're talking about Brightline or whether we're talking about somebody's 10-person business or a 1-person startup or something in Vegas with 1,000 employees and 50 locations, because, you know, it's all relevant. And the nonprofits we've worked on, you know, what are some of the takeaways and how we can inform a brand story? And as I look at some of the questions we'll get to after this, evolving brand stories.
I think that the first piece, which is a word you actually use, is relevance. I mean, today more than ever, brand stories are ways in which people connect. Stories are about memory. It's how we connect and remind ourselves what we have in common, a sense of belonging. And that works for huge brands, whether you're the Nikes of the world or the small business brands. Regardless, you need to figure out what is the research, how does that research really distinguish your brand, which is what branding is all about. It's about differentiation. And that research will help understand who the audiences are with personas, what the competitive landscape is, what the brand can fulfill, what can you really do to prove yourself as being able to do it. And lastly, what is the context like in the case with Brightline? What's happening in the world today? This idea of elevated experience of actually having technology that does work, that can save time as well as keep the environment better. So those are factors that people really want to continue to connect to. So brand story, in terms of informing it very simply, is the relevance and what's the emotional connections. It's different than mission and vision. It has to do with that sense that we want to be a part of it, because our heart makes decisions as much as the mind. What about design? Where does that take us?
Yeah, you know, what we were saying about like emotion, like, so design brings the brand to life. And, you know, for a lot of times it's the first impression, you know, and people tend to think that design or creative is you know, only for large organizations, big companies, and they tend to, you know, overlook it, but they shouldn't, because design impacts the bottom line. There's dozens and dozens of studies that show us that professional design greatly impacts the success of the business. You know, you have such a short amount of time these days to leave an impression, to leave a mark on an audience. And you can use design, regardless of the size of your organization or your budget. You can use design, professional design, to leave a lasting impression, right? Think of, you know, your logo, the colors you use, a professional looking website. These are all indications to that audience of potentially what using your product will be like. And, you know, you want to make a good impression so that then you pique their interest, but you draw them in, you bring them into your world so that then that you can have that transaction with them. So certainly design is about communicating something legibly, but you want to use emotion and you want to do it professionally so that your design and what you're communicating is not just legible, but it's memorable.
You know, Kenny, you sitting here in Vegas with a lot of our audience, I can't help but think about the ginormous pylon signs out in front of casinos in Vegas, you know, harkening back to from Circus's sign, which is still there, that some of us can picture, you know, and joy and fun and circus, to, you know, Aria and Wynn with ginormous screens showing you what's happening inside, with, of course, the beautifully fonted, short, simple 4-letter names of those properties on top in lights. All the way down to every other store and restaurant that we all go to in our towns, and think about whether they have a cool sign and mark or not.
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunities there. And that's definitely what you have me thinking about. So with that, Bailey, as we think about for every business, for Brightline and for everyone else, how do you figure out who your audiences are and how to message to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a really key piece to this is, okay, identifying your audience or audiences, and then, how do we get the messaging to them? So, and that's kind of a two-pronged piece right there is, getting your messaging right, and then making sure you're getting your messaging in front of those audiences in those right places at the right time. So, we touched on this a little bit ago. When you first just look at identifying that audience, we looked at NetBase, we looked at Global Web Index in the earlier slides, and yes, those are some big SaaS tools that maybe not everyone has access to, but there's other ways that we can find those and starting with Facebook and going to Facebook's audience insights. So any brand that has a Facebook page can jump into those audience insights and start to uncover a lot of really cool information about who their page followers are. So, identifying other brands that they, have an affinity towards, other pages they follow, what types of content they engage with. These are just free tools that you can use to really get an idea of who your audience and your customers are. So starting to put some of that together can give you a good idea about who those core audiences are. But then again, looking at where they're active. So if it is, maybe a younger audience, we want to look at like an Instagram and a TikTok and, channels like that. Or if it's a little bit of an older audience, maybe we're looking at Facebook, we're looking at search. So what are those, common searches, questions they're asking, looking at some things like that, and then really just being that resource to them. So how can we answer those questions? How can we, like Kenny was talking about with one of the slides earlier, make their lives better, make their lives easier. So again, being that resource, taking a look at those audiences and making sure that you're speaking to those audiences in very direct ways.
Yeah, I think those probably apply as much whether you're an accountant or a lawyer or Brightline or a casino. It's really the same process in reality. So Kels, to make it accountable, how do we use all these methods to measure and report and understand what is happening with our investments?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And pretty much the advertising campaign is going to be a roll-up of all of the above. So, you did your competitor research in the beginning. A reminder that you can use that Facebook ad library as a free tool to see what your competitors are doing. You built the target personas based off the brand sentiment that Bailey found and the conversations that we had with Kenny and Steven. So now you're ready to put it out there, and you want to make sure that you're set up for success. So first, you want to make sure you have the correct campaign structure. So knowing that you have those target personas, make sure each one of those are in their own ad set, and then each has that corresponding creative running with it. And again, just a reminder of that universal cohesive messaging. So making sure that you have similar taglines running throughout all the audiences. So you have that similar look and feel, because knowing that people likely overlap, as we mentioned earlier, between the different audiences. So once everything's up and running, just make sure you have your tracking in place. There's pixels on every ad platform that you can place on your website to track not just the clicks to your website, but actual conversion actions. So if you're a lead generated company tracking form fills, you can track that with a lead event. But if you're selling something on your website, you can track that with purchase events. So making sure that you have all that tracking in place before you go live is going to set you up for success. And then on top of that, set benchmarks before you launch the campaign. So just so you know that what would be a kind of probable mode of success. So say you want to hit a 0.5% click-through rate. Knowing that is going to help you better dictate when to pause your campaign efforts. And another great way to kind of understand when you should evolve and when you should pause is going to be looking in Facebook Ads Manager. They have a delivery column, and they'll actually tell you if it's still learning about your campaign, meaning it doesn't have enough conversions, or if it got out of the learning phase and it's up and running. If you see your campaigns are stuck in that learning phase, keep it running until it gets out of there, or possibly back up and consider optimizing for a different conversion point. And then from there, once you do see that something's working, so maybe it passed that 0.5% click-through rate, go back to your creative team and tell them it's working, and evolve your creative from there. So start continuing that testing. So maybe you're going to change just a very subtle call to action or change a color block on the creative. So knowing what works, keep that same look and feel, But just as conversely, something might not work. So if something is coming back with a 0.1% click-through rate, meaning people aren't engaging with it, it's not getting them to click through to your website, it's probably a signal that, it's not resonating, something needs to change. So that's when we'll go back to that drawing board with Kenny and Steven and really try to come up with a different creative strategy and go back and test that as well.
Thanks, Kels. All super applicable. And in the interest of saving a little time for the Q&A and the questions coming in, I'll very quickly let everyone know that you have heard some mention by Bailey and others of what we call NetBase, one of our cool SaaS tools that we use to do research. And for anyone who's joined the webinar today, we would be happy to do what we call a brand health audit and run it through the tool. So you will see shortly in your email in the next day or so a invite to reach out to us and go ahead and inquire about that, and we can connect with you, get your brand info, get some competitive info, and go ahead and create that for you and get it out to you. So beyond that, there's an example of what you might be seeing in your inbox very shortly. We'll get into some Q&A. I'm actually just going to give some kind of quick answers to some of the questions, and then I'll toss some of them to the team to maybe dive into a little more deeply. One person noted that we didn't touch on cost and affordability, which is certainly something that is in the realm of conversation. And we've heard talk of potentially a $60 to $80 one-way train rate, but without having a little more info, hanging back a little bit before we can inform, is this a value? Is this a premium product? And figuring out how that plays into it. But definitely a very good question. Question about A/B testing, which we talked about in a lot of veins. There's lots of ways to look at A/B testing. You can take an audience and A/B test two different creatives and simply carve that audience up. You can A/B test audiences against one another and test one audience versus another. You can A/B test channels. So it's really just a concept of trying different things and measuring the success. To Kelsey's point, if you know what your KPI is, you know what you're trying to accomplish with a key metric like that, it can help you test creative, test audiences, and really test anything. The influencer front, Bailey, do you want to kind of explain what qualifies someone as an influencer in the world we're looking at?
I certainly can. I would actually almost answer this by saying, really everyone's an influencer. I mean, whether you have 100,000, a million, or 200 followers on Instagram, or not even on Instagram, ultimately, everyone on this call has influence over someone. So if you're talking about a product you just, tested or bought, or a food you just ate, or a restaurant you just went to, by talking about them, you're influencing your peer group around you to possibly go try that as well. So really, one of the things we like to talk about with clients is making sure that we're thinking of our customers themselves as influencers, because they're going to be the people that spread that word of mouth referral through their peer groups. But from more of the marketing side of influencers, there's really a bunch of levels to it. There's micro and nano influencers who can be, 5,000, 10,000 followers, up to the just celebrity influencers that have, millions of followers. Depending on the campaign you're running or the brand you are, there can be benefits to all of those different size groups. So it really just depends on the campaign that you're running and what your goals are. But a lot of people are actually starting to skew more towards those kind of like micro and nano influencers, because they're a little more, everything seems a little bit more natural with them. Their social feeds don't feel like a spammy inbox. So hopefully that answers your question about how you qualify an influencer.
I think it does, and I would tell everyone not to be afraid of the term. Whether you own a smoothie shop or donut shop in Green Valley or Summerlin, or whether you have a business, having a Golden Knight as a client is having an influencer. Having a Raider as a client is having an influencer. Having, soccer moms and soccer dads, if you're a donut or smoothie shop, those are influencers, right? And not being afraid of using that concept, and don't think it's a big agency or a Nike concept. It applies to everyone. One question here, what is a pixel? The team might be able to jump in and give a better answer. Pixel is effectively a little piece of code or tracking code that you put on a website. Pretty much every webmaster, website girl or guy that helps should be able to help put that there. Or feel free to connect with us after and we can give you a little advice on how to do that. But it effectively allows for tracking with things like Facebook or Google or lots of other tools. question, and Steve and Kels, feel free to jump in. Every team has potential blind spots: customer demographics, race, religion, gender, education, everything. Are there tools to help us fill those blind spots and gaps so we don't offend or miss out on specific customer audiences? Great question.
Yeah, and I can take it from a kind of a media perspective, because we do want to make sure that we are understanding who's engaging with our campaigns. So anytime that you launch a media campaign through an app platform, they are going to have some degree of breakdowns and some degree of insights that they can give you based off the performance that you're getting. So for example, on Facebook, you can understand what age groups, what gender, what DMA they're located in are most engaging. And that's actually going to help you pivot your targeting as well. So if you see that the 25 to 34 age group from LA, it does have the most engagement, make sure that you're then tailoring your content to that. Similarly, with any other ad platform, Pinterest has a great audience insights tool that actually gives you specific keywords and interest affinities that they most engage with that can better help you build campaigns as well. So any ad platform, just look up audiences and they should be an insights tool in there.
Yeah, and it's a great note that artificial intelligence has purposes right now, and it can help us look at things that we would never think of and go use the tools to do that. One last question I'll try to sneak in before we have to get off. Stephen, a really great question here. How do you tell a story? How long do you tell a story before pivoting or assessing if you should change or evolve the story? Thinking about the chamber with this brand evolution after 100 years, thinking about all of the brands needing brand evolution right now, going through COVID in this year. How does that work? When do you know it's time to stop and look at what you're up to?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, the first thing is to get the story right.
You have 30 seconds, go. Get
the story right, make sure that people care about it, that it connects to the emotion and the heart of something. And then I think that at the end of the day, once there is enough data that gives you that, there's also gut. You have to use gut and data to say this story compels, makes me want to do something, makes me want to belong. To refresh it, give it legs first and see what it does in terms of looking then at the KPIs and the research and the metrics, and then nuance it. All stories are beautiful and they can evolve, but let's start with the core. That's the hardest thing.
Thank you, Stephen, for that wisdom, and thank you all for sharing for the last hour. Joyce, Chamber, and everyone joining, we really appreciate you taking the time. Joyce, any parting words or reminders?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much, Justin, Kenny, Kelsey, Stephen, Bailey, all of your team. You're incredible. What a great look behind the scenes of what kind of makes the sausage making, right? And everyone on the call, thank you so much for attending. I hope this was useful to you. These are the kinds of things and resources that we want to bring to our members. And these are the incredible experts we have in our membership. So thank you all. Be on the lookout for the email regarding the brand health audit by REQ. Thank you guys for that. And I can't thank you enough for your team. Please stay safe, stay healthy. And if there's anything the Chamber can do for all of you, let us know. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joyce.
Take care.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.